Jim Towns, welcome to Sue Up the Podcast.
Thank you, Terrence. I appreciate it.
Okay, I have to say, just while I'm thinking of it, this is one of those things that sadly people don't get when they don't watch the video, but you have a painting behind you, like right on the other side of your head, and
Mhm.
it's like a Rorschach painting because I look at him like that's a sideways fedora, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. There's Sumi E paintings, and my wife's dad used to work at LAX, and for a minute in like the 60s or 70s, he worked in the Lost and Found. And these got in the Lost and Found, and they sat there for like a year and a half or something like that. And he finally like took them home or something, and then we had them framed. You can't see it's behind the guy, but the tree. But there's one that it actually looks like a little spaceman. The little Sumi, it looks like a little robot guy with little antenna and a helmet and stuff. And I always call him the Sumi E spaceman. And I keep thinking there's a story there about the Sumi E spaceman, and I haven't gotten it. I
I'll
haven't
tell
cracked
you,
it yet, but I will.
every time I see something like that, and I hear a story like that, I'm like, these are the kinds of
Yeah,
like weird, obscure things that happen in life where you're like, just write it down as a writer, you're creative, you're like, this eventually will pop up as like the way that something
yeah.
happens.
You're stalking that, and especially if you can keep it handy so you see it every other day or whatever. And you're like, this is our dining room, but we actually sort of turned it into a library and
Hmm.
study during pandemic. We painted and
Yeah.
everything, and so now it's just filled with like artifacts and interesting things. This is from a friend of ours, an older lady who died, and it's like a globe from an old
Oh,
encyclopedia or something like that that was framed.
that's
This is like
so
a griffin
cool.
sculpture. This little tiki guy. So
Uh-huh.
it's eclectic, but it's also like, yeah,
Yeah.
these are artifacts, right? And they have meaning on their own, but maybe they can have a different meaning, and that's the
Hmm.
idea of keeping them around.
In when we did this conversation with Brian from Starlight Pulp, we talked about
Right.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And one of the things that I think Tarantino did such an amazing job with showing Cliff's home was as
Mm-hmm.
you it pans through, you see different objects and it tells you character choices without having to
Yes.
tell you. And that's, I think, one of the interesting differences between film and writing is that writing, you describe each of those objects and hope the audience can kind of infer or you can tell them. Whereas in a film, visually, you just show them and have to rely on the audience to infer what's going on around it.
Yes. Yes. And you have to allow for the fact that maybe they'll make that thing connection, or allow for that maybe they won't, and maybe it doesn't. And then also I think as a filmmaker, the thing someone like Quentin Tarantino or someone like me who's not at that level. Um, the thing we have to acknowledge, as opposed to like say John Ford or
Hmm.
whomever back in the days, is that people are going to hopefully watch your movie multiple times,
Yes.
and so there's an initial experience,
Hmm.
and then there's a secondary, tertiary, whatever. Like I mean, we all have our go-to things. How many times have I watched like The Hunt for Red October? It's like what's just one of my go-tos. It's a perfectly paced film. It is a perfectly paced film. And then it's like on the 17th time, you're like, oh, it's that because of, oh, that's so nice. That's brilliant. Yeah. Anyway.
That's actually, it's funny you mentioned that. That's one of the things about filmmaking that I've recently noticed because just, I can't remember who it was I was having a conversation with. The thought that my parents' generation, which
Mm,
I'm assuming is yours too,
yeah.
is just casually assuming age, is that was when movies were just like the home video market came around during my lifetime
Yeah. Yeah. Mine
versus
too.
beforehand there wasn't like when I was a little kid was when VHS tapes started coming out. Whereas before
Mm-hmm.
that, you basically saw films re-released in theaters or it was are they airing on TV and are they
Is it on
butchered
TV?
half to death to have them on
Yeah. Yeah.
TV?
Can you catch them on TV and also at 320 DPI or something?
Yeah.
But yeah.
I was explaining to
I was
this
talking about. Go ahead.
I was explaining this with my wife. We were watching the Bond films. She had never seen them before. All of those pre-title sequences with the chicks like dancing
Yeah.
like this. She's like, "Why is that like so very explicit?" I'm like, "Well, you have to think about it. Back when they made these, they weren't. Like no one was going to when they made the first like four movies and you have naked women silhouetting
Yeah.
they're not expecting it to be 4K resolution that you watch on a big screen. It's a
It,
movie theater. You'll see it twice if you're
yes.
lucky, and the resolution sucks.
Half the people are still coming in with their popcorn or whatever. But no, exactly. And so now you're going to like in film we call it pixel peeping,
Uh-huh.
where you almost can really get in close on a 4K or HD TV and be like, oh, that's the. And so there's as a filmmaker, the other thing that you're dealing with is there's an element of future proofing you have to
Hmm.
allow for in your thing, and it comes down to everything from like we can chart
Yes.
the year by what model phone, how many lenses does it have? No, no, no. And people know this, right? So
Yes.
I myself have watched movies. It's like, oh, there's
Hmm.
only one lens in the phone. This is pre 2022 or something like that. It's a weird thing, and it's maybe not something you should like obsess over, but it's something to be mindful of at the very least. I think that's
Hmm.
why flip phones are so popular in
Yes.
films, the disposable like burner type things, because like that now they're archaic, and yet some people still use them, and it's sort of also like a proletariat status symbol, right? Like,
Hmm.
oh, he uses a flip phone. He's not bourgeois or anything like that. I don't know. I did that one time with a movie. I purposely went with retro, older, like non-smartphones, just
Hmm.
so that you couldn't pin it down a little bit.
No, there is this like timeless era that kind of fits in.
Mm,
I know when we had a conversation with Nolan Knight, that's what he said he was kind of trying to sit with his book Gallows Dome, is set in that era where
yeah.
it achieves a kind of timelessness. And this is something I think he did a great job with Braddock's Falls, is it's set in 1989, if I remember right.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that era works so perfectly because again, this is pre-tech in
Yes.
like that we take for granted today, which allows the narrative to function easier, better. It also does, it fits the we recognize this time
Hmm.
without it
Yeah.
being distractingly period.
It's like a modern moment, and yet it's
Hmm.
just pre whatever like
Hmm.
that. I
It's like
believe
when they
the
say it's just like 50 years in the future when they say something happened or
yes,
in the
yeah,
immediate
yeah,
future.
yeah. It's understandable and stuff, but it's also like for some reason it's one of those like 1989. I was um uh wait, what was I doing? 1989. I was like in high school,
Uh-huh.
and but it's like so you remember that you remember what things were like. So you remember what you were into. Like I was still into
Hmm.
things that were new back then. Now I'm not into maybe. I'm into older things now.
Yeah.
Because I'm older. But yeah, but it's also fun to like now you have to research like he brings his Commodore like early Commodore like portable computer type thing to work with and stuff, and you're like, okay, which one was the model that was popular then and stuff. Yeah, that's really. But without the phones, without the internet and everything like that,
Hmm.
that's the drama, right? Because the trouble with establishing drama now is to put someone in peril
Yes.
and have him not be reachable or be able to
Hmm.
reach out to whatever authorities or whatever. And so that I mean the perennial
Hmm.
like cell phone not working, no service thing, or I mean yeah, but if you can establish a world like that where you don't have recourse like that and you have to
Hmm.
send someone in a car to the station and stuff, yeah, it just helped up the peril in it.
Hmm. Tell us a little bit about Braddock's Falls. I really enjoyed the story. I heard this in a podcast recently. I'm not really a big horror film person, but like I like hearing about horror films. It's a very interesting dynamic. I think the creation of them are usually more fascinating than the films themselves to me necessarily. But the comment that was made by this podcaster was a good horror movie has characters that you would follow even if the horror wasn't happening or the monster didn't happen or the bloody bath.
Yeah.
And that's something I think you achieved so well with Braddock's Falls is I genuinely enjoyed the characters and was fascinated. Obviously, I'm biased because the dude's a writer in the story. It
Yeah.
Hearing his story was genuinely enjoyable. He has to overcome this thing, and it instantly had me hooked.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I try with everything I write is to make interesting characters living through, you know, like someone has said this, story you're telling is it's about creating interesting characters and then following them through the most interesting part of their life. You
Hmm.
don't, we don't talk about the main character when he's in eighth grade because that's not the interesting part of his life. We're picking him up from
Hmm.
this point to this point where this happens. So Braxwell started as that I watched some documentary or something like that about nudist colonies and
Hmm.
back in the 50s when they became a bit of a thing. Um, and I'd always had this idea of like, okay, what like a slasher in a nudist colony would be hilarious, right? Because you're so
Exposed.
vulnerable. Like, yeah, yeah, yeah. You have none of the, none of the protections, and also they're so secluded. I mean, and that's
Yeah.
the other thing point too for the dramas. You want them to be secluded, so
Hmm.
that there's that, and then you put your producer, logical, filmmaker hat on, and you go like, this is in the present climate of our culture, this is unfilmable. This is not.
Yes.
There's no one. I mean, you could film it. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
no one's giving you money to make
Correct.
this movie. And if they do, you got to be suspicious of who's doing it because there's probably motivation. So
Mhm.
what's happened with a couple of my books, like Bloodsucker City and this one,
Mhm.
are they originated as screenplays or film projects
Mhm.
that at some point I was not able to sell, or I thought like this might translate really well into the narrative, a novel format. And so that's what I took with Braddock Falls. Um, and just, yeah, and having him be a writer, having him be, and but the I will say the real moment where I was like, I need to write the story was the idea of coming up with the fact that he's a gamer and he runs the
Yes.
D&D thing. So when he goes to the nudist colony, he starts running a D&D game. So the idea of all these people sitting around naked playing D&D, I found it so hilariously funny and
Mhm.
adorable, kind of, that's when I was like, okay, I got to write, for nothing, no other reason, I got to write a nudist slasher Dungeons and Dragons book. Because they talk about hitting all the four quadrants, right? You got
Yeah.
everything there now. Yeah, yeah. So that was just the idea, and it really just you can tell, right, like when it's working, it just
Mhm.
writes itself. You just,
Yeah.
here we go. I was on a job up north, and I was just, every night I'd come back to my Airbnb and just write, and stuff. It came out wonderful. And I love it. I'm really happy with that little book.
It's so readable. Like I that's what a book should be, obviously. But when you pick up a book sometimes and you're like, the text is dense, the the actual words are dense, they're paragraphs. It's too I'm sure that someone that's a grammar nerd could be, or an English nerd could be like, oh, well, it's because of the number of this types of words versus those types of words. But like, really, it's so breezy and readable, which I think
Thank you.
plays
Yeah.
really well as a contrast to what is actually happening as the tension ratchets up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a byproduct of me being a screenwriter. I
Hmm.
had a literary rep read something of mine one time, and they're like, "This reads more like a movie than a book." And my guy who submitted it is like, "Yeah, there's probably a reason for that." In screenwriting, we talk about too much black on the page,
Hmm.
which is too much ink. It's too
Yes.
dense.
Hmm.
It's too over described, over whatever. So I think by nature, being a screenwriter first for 10 years
Hmm.
or 15 years, and then merging into more prose has made me, yeah, be a little more like, I love the poetry of the words and how they flow and how descriptions happen. I like when it gets a little expressionistic, the way you're describing some things. Because, like, I
Hmm.
remember right back in the day reading like Raymond Chandler, and when Philip
Yes.
Marlowe gets like drugged or knocked out, he has a whole section of one of his stories that he describes super
Hmm.
expressionistically, and like it's almost a precursor to like William S. Burroughs
Yeah.
style or something. So interesting, and that stuck with me. So like the idea of like, and then also like, the interesting challenge this book that I thought I give myself was to write it from the two perspectives. So you write it from the main
Yes.
character's perspective, and
Hmm.
then you keep switching over to the serial killer's
Hmm.
perspective, um, and back and forth. And that was an it, I mean, I enjoyed writing the main character's perspective a lot more than I liked getting
Yes.
inside the head of the thing. But I thought that was important also to uh, try and explain maybe to the reader and myself too, like what takes someone to this extreme point. What radicalizes them, what sets them off and everything. So how is the world different from his perspective? That the
Hmm.
things he's doing seem to be logical.
Hmm.
So
I think you did a fantastic job of towing that line with the serial killer character too. Winston is his name, which I'm
yeah.
really curious who named Winston in your real life that you chose to use this name
um,
because
uh,
that sometimes happens.
shout out to my friend. I was in Boy Scouts as a teenager, and there was an older kid named Winston Spencer, who I'm still friends with. I know on Facebook and everything. And he was honestly like, he was actually like the coolest dude. He was the dude.
Yeah.
All the young guys were like, "I'm just cool with that guy." Like he was like 16 and he was already a full grown man, right? We're
Hmm.
all like, "Man, that guy's cool." he can start a fire, he can fish, he can, and I managed to still be friends with Winston all these, 40 years later or whatever. Cool dude. But I always just thought it was such a great name.
It
Um,
really
and
is.
it's a name that like, I guess I want to say, you have to be cool to pull that name off. And if you're
Yes.
not cool, then you're tagged with that name. And
hmm
that's its own burden. And maybe that's part of what sets off Winston Conroy in the book.
I mean, that's a thing. Like the idea of the character being so much of a contrast from like when we think of Winston Churchill, obviously, like this huge
Yeah.
gravity of
Yes.
wait, never
Yeah,
give
right.
in. And if you can't live up to that, it's like just tanks. Like
Oh
your name
God,
is
yeah.
Jim. We did an episode with the guy that did a documentary on people named James Bond. And like the burden that
Oh
your
yeah.
life becomes when your name is James Bond.
You own that thing. Yeah, yeah. My name is James Towns, and so every time in our history class we got to Jamestown, the settlement and whatever like that, it was
Yeah.
always like everyone turns and looks, and it's like, okay, all right, I know Jamestown.
hmm
And then I went to Jamestown once or twice on
Oh,
a
please
school
tell me
trip,
that there are
and
like
that was
pictures
fun.
of Jamestown in Jamestown.
Yeah, you know what? I was like in junior high school, and I was like trying to get this girl to talk to me at the time, so I don't think I was very focused on that. So that I might have to go back some year. I don't know.
New story. Said it there. Uh, one of the things that actually I wanted to bring up because I think the first time we started interacted at all was you contributed to Starlight Pulp Review #1,
Mm.
and that story that you wrote, Not Quite Human, if I remember right, was the title. That story
Human,
was,
but not quite so. I think.
yeah, there we go.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, it was very enjoyable. It's very different. For whatever reason, I'm like I said, I'm not hugely a big horror guy, but I really resonated with that story and really enjoyed it. I thought it was very well written.
Thank you, thank you. Well, again, I mean, I think it's actually a story. It's a story that has a vampire in it, but it's actually a story
hmm
about this guy who runs this bodega who inherited from his parents when his mom when she died and everything. And then I also this is another thing. I have a screenplay that has something to do with this, but I also thought, what the heck, I'll do a story about this idea of a vampire that lives so long that he kind of goes through cycles, right? So it's every
hmm
like 6 or 7 or 12 years he's back in town, and he just has, and it's just when I go back to New York City, there's an Indian restaurant I really like that I'll go to if I have a chance because I remember liking when I lived there. So now when I go back, so the idea like if this vampire just has this place that he likes to eat the people in this certain place, he just returns and comes back, and that's his, that's how he views this
He's a
thing.
foodie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That the setting itself is based on when I lived in New York City. I actually for a while lived in Jersey City and would
hmm
take the PATH train and commute. And I worked at a restaurant right near World Trade Center when it was still
hmm
there and everything. This was 98, 99. And it was a little corner, for anyone who does that, bodega is like a little corner grocery store market
hmm
thing, right? In case anyone doesn't know. And there was this Egyptian guy who ran it, this older man, and his son would work there sometimes. So he's an older man, he's short, stocky, everything like that. And I'd go in there all the time. And sometimes I'd be like a dollar or two short or something like that. And he was never, he's like, whatever, you pay me next time. And I'd come back. Sweet old guy. And then he had little bits of like, he had actually a little meat section, a little grocery section. So I could do all my shopping there. And then one night I come in and there's a dude laying on the ground in front of the counter, a big, tall guy, and he's not moving. And the owner guy is behind the counter and he's like, oh, he tried to rob me. It's okay. I call cops. Oh, there's fresh steaks in the back. So I have to go and I shop and I grab like my meat and I'm kind of like leaning over the guy on the counter, right? And the guy's not really moving. And I see now he's got my owner guy's got like a lead pipe with like electric tape wrapped around, right? And so, I just take it off. And the next time I go and I see him and he's like, oh, hey, how you doing? Um, so the thing you take away from it is like, this is not the first time this guy's had to do this, right?
hmm
This is the reality of this guy, this neighborhood guy who's he knows everyone comes to that store, but every once in a while, some dude comes to that store, he has to take care of it. So that was the origin of that story.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
life in the big city.
hmm The the next point I actually want to talk about was Killer X. So you released this film in 2024, one of the things I found absolutely stunning about it was the martial arts. And you actually worked with
Okay.
martial artists in the
Yes.
film.
Yes. I have a martial arts background. I did karate all through junior high and into high school, and then dropped out for a little while, and then got back into kickboxing and have done some Muay Thai and everything. I have a bunch of friends out here who are actors and stunt guys, and also stunt people, and
Hmm.
also martial artists. Um, so I have this resource. So I've done a lot of work with a guy named William Christopher Ford, who was in he's in his 50s now. He was in Karate
Hmm.
Kid 3. He was one of the bad guys, and now
Oh,
he has
cool.
just recently returned in Cobra Kai. He showed up again. He reprised his character in this final season
Awesome.
of thing, and if everyone knows, he's Dennis de Guzman in that. He's the guy who shows up with a really long black hair at the end. Will's a great guy. Will and I have worked on a dozen projects together. We had a series called 52 Masters, which is some of
Hmm.
those episodes are on Prime right now and Tubi TV, where he went and studied. He's a fifth on black belt in Okinawan style karate, though.
Hmm.
But he also, but the show is about him going and studying in different martial arts and doing like Hawaiian Lua
Cool.
or Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And some of these he's familiar with, and some like Salat or something like that. He's not as much like Filipino style. So and it's all about him learning, and it's about you can be a master in something and not know anything about the next thing. You need to not be afraid to pick up something new. And by the way, we just announced we're doing a new series called The Beginner's Mind Journey together. We just
Ooh,
dropped the announcement yesterday.
congratulations. That sounds
And
awesome.
it's exciting, and it's a continuation of this, and it's
Hmm.
conversations with people who are experts in their field, who've
Hmm.
achieved like success as directors, actors, stunt people, dancers, whatever.
Hmm.
Conversations with like how did they get to where they got to, and how can we get there in our own discipline. So I'm excited to be working with him again.
Hmm.
Anyway, um, Will got to know a guy named Jose Torres, who's
Hmm.
a Korean style martial artist. He's a Puerto
Hmm.
Rican American, but he studies Korean style. And he lives in New Jersey, and he's the head of a big martial arts international group, and he's got a big following. And he did acting in college, and he's now in his 40s, and he wanted to get back into doing some stuff. Will hooked me up with him at Dragon Fest, which is Michael Matsuda's big event out here for martial arts
That
associated
sounds
with.
awesome.
I do some work with the Martial Arts History Museum out here. It's in Pasadena or in Glendale. It's in Glendale now, California. So we met up, and he and I started talking, and I pitched him a couple ideas of and you never know. Like I start endeavors like this with lots of people, and
Hmm.
sometimes those people come through, and sometimes those people just sort of fade away, and
Hmm.
nothing happens. Jose was on it, and he was like, "I'm gonna raise the money to make this happen," and he did, and he really did, and he did
Wow.
quickly. We from the time we met, within like 6 months, we were shooting pre-shoots for the film and stuff. We shot that first scene with my friend Gerald Okamura, who was in Blade and Big Trouble in Little China and G.I. Joe:
Hmm.
Rise of Cobra and everything. Yeah, yeah, and I shot that one scene, and Jose showed up, and he just did that scene. I was like, because I wasn't exactly sure his acting chops and everything. And I was like,
Yeah.
nope, this is gonna work. He was great. They had great chemistry together. They're sensible, the
Hmm.
sensitivity and everything. So yeah, that was great. And we were off and running. And then we shot most of Killer X in New Jersey and Pennsylvania in the summer
Hmm.
of that year. Uh, I came back in December and we did some pickups because we had a, a Mohammed Kisi, who used to go by Michael Kisi, who he's Tong Po in Kickboxer
Okay.
with Jean-Claude Van Damme. He's the big scary dude that he fights. Right? He's like really the best part of that whole movie. We had Mohammed booked, but when Mohammed he lives in Europe, and when he tried to fly out for the main shoot in the summer, his visa got flagged for some reason, and
Uh,
I woke up to like 16 text messages from Jose like the day he was supposed to be there, like we have a so we had to reschedule. I had to come back in December and shoot more stuff, but I had reached a point where I was getting a little burned out here in LA filming.
hmm.
Um, LA is it's hard to explain to people not here, but LA, when you're an indie filmmaker, not the studio guy, when you're indie like
Hmm.
me, it's a hostile place to try and make movies. It
Yeah.
is
It's literally
expensive.
designed to try keeping you out.
It actually kind of is. It is. The permits are extraordinarily expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I've had small budget films where like a third of the budget just went to just getting permission to film somewhere.
Ooh.
Tons of regulation, tons of everything, and it's good. It's good that
Mm-hmm.
there's rules and regulations so that filming doesn't interfere with normal people's lives because people actually live in this town. Um, but it does it's difficult
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, and also like so much Billy shot out too. Like
Yeah.
people everywhere you turn, someone's filmed something there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the ability to go to New Jersey and Pennsylvania
Mm-hmm.
and find these locations that we, they would just people would be like we can we film here, and they'd be like, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
and that's it. No one's asking for money. No one's like,
Mm-hmm.
can you get the name of the business in the film? Sure, we can. So some
Mm-hmm.
free promotion, whatever. I found just a wonderful group of people who were dedicated to making something great,
Mm-hmm.
who had a positive attitude, and they made up for some people on the crew they made up for a lack of experience with
Mm-hmm.
just enthusiasm and positivity and their own real skill set too. It was great, and Jose and I, we did that Killer X1 came out, and like about 3 weeks ago, I shot the first scenes, pre-shot some scenes for Killer X2. So I'm
Awesome.
doing my first sequel ever, which is it's exciting because I think a sequel gives you a chance to if you control the first one and now you're doing the
Mm-hmm.
second, it gives you a chance to sort of build upon everything everyone expects from the first one, and then
Mm-hmm.
subvert that a little bit
Yes.
and go different and something. So it's the first movie. Killer X1 was very. I really want to experiment with color because I've been
Mm-hmm.
accused of my films being a little bleak in
Mm-hmm.
the past. So I really want to make this jazzy and colorful, and it was a little
Mm-hmm.
family friendly almost. It
Mm-hmm.
was exciting, but and then so for this one we're going widescreen, and it's getting darker in tone. It's getting darker visually, a
Mm-hmm.
little more monochromatic, a lot more intense. So it's
Mm-hmm.
exciting to be starting on this next step of the journey.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thanks. It's exciting. It's really cool.
I mean, that's I think it's Terminator, the whole Terminator 2 is basically Terminator 1 with like four or five things changed. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah, arguably.
arguably, but it's when you have that's
Yeah,
the cool thing about sequels is when they're done right, you can this
yeah,
is what we did the first movie and then
right.
subvert what you did the first movie with enough changes. It's the have you heard of Maya, the Maya rule?
No.
It's most advanced yet acceptable. MAYA. The
Okay.
concept is you push the envelope too far, people disconnect, but you need to push
Mm.
it far enough that it's
Oh, that makes sense.
different.
Yeah, yeah, no, right. That's cool. But I mean, if you want to make that Terminator comparison, I mean, the big thing is to subvert is to build upon this
Hmm.
idea of
Yeah.
Arnold as this unstoppable killing machine, and then 20-30 minutes into the film, turn the thing and find out that he's the hero of the movie now.
Hmm.
Spoilers, sorry for anybody
Hey,
in the past
you
40
watch those
years who hasn't seen it.
old trailers? They spoiled the twists. Um,
Did they? Oh
so
wow.
in the Terminator 2, the trailer has Arnold saving John Connor in the
Oh
trailer.
wow. Oh, that's
And
interesting.
so GoldenEye
I'll bet
sat
that drove
down.
Cameron crazy. Oh my. I'll bet
Okay,
someone got the angriest phone call.
so I'm really curious, you as a filmmaker, when a trailer is being made, how much control do you have over that? What information do you like to give to the audience? Because I do think that this is becoming more
Yeah.
and more with internet culture, because again, you're right. People can watch a trailer on repeat and dissect in a
Oh, and
way
they
that
do,
they
right? I mean,
didn't back in the 80s.
there's whole YouTube channels dedicated to just taking the trailer for whatever the next Star Wars TV show out, and here's we get a glimpse of this robot, and this robot's from this, and this, yeah, right. Droid, sorry. As a Star Wars nerd, I should have gotten that right. Well, so to your question, it depends. I've had films where I've had to cut the trailer myself. Um,
Hmm.
I've had films where the producers just brought in somebody to do it. I Let's see, End Times, which is a post-apocalyptic kind of
Hmm.
father-daughter love story movie with zombies in it, is out on it's on Prime TV right now. We sold that to the Asylum, our
Hmm.
friends who think that brought a Sharknado and everything, and they cut the trailer and they didn't like consult with us or anything. They're like, no, we're doing the trailer. and it came out great. I mean, I think it's really good. So it really depends. It's a case by case kind of scenario, and you hope, yeah, that it's gonna whatever. But I mean, I can't imagine working for like the 20th Century Fox or someone, or Marvel or whatever. Um, I mean, this would be the least problem if I was getting to work for those guys. But yeah, there's an element of control over the project that you give up because they have marketing people. They have, they know. I mean, there's a reason for a couple years there, every single trailer started with that one piano note, like
Hmm.
like someone figured out that worked and they went with it and they run with it and they run it into the ground and then someone does something new and they're like, oh, we'll do this. My current pet peeve with trailers is there's like you click on it right on YouTube or
Hmm.
whatever, and then there's a mini like
Yes, they do a
seven,
teaser
17,
before the trailer actually
17 second
starts.
teaser to the
Yes,
trailer, and then you get in the trailer. It's like, why am I watching a trailer for the trailer
it's
before?
the YouTube skip button. They want you
Yeah,
to, they want pay
yeah,
less for the ads, so they're going to do
yeah,
that version, and then they want
yeah.
you to click, not click it.
I mean,
It's
please,
ridiculous.
that's so silly. That's seconded only from when they put a scene together on like YouTube or on a Instagram or something like that, and they cut it
Yes.
vertically, and you have
Uh-huh.
that like fake digi pay. I'm recently starting to I one of my cameras now is set up to shoot vertical content
Hmm.
because it's here, it's not going anywhere. I
Hmm.
get it, and as a filmmaker, you see the world
Hmm.
horizontally in a landscape pattern format, but there's some interesting challenge to like trying to frame something vertically. So if I'm working on any other projects that are not film stuff, I'm sometimes shooting that way. And I think it's fun when you intend to film something that way.
Yes.
It's when you're chopping something in thirds.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it reminds me of the Woodstock movie, right? Where there's like it's like split screen the whole time, It's like that.
So you were telling me that you've also got podcasts going on right now. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I co-host the Borgo Pass Horror podcast. We started in 2021. We just did our 100th episode. It's about
Congratulations.
yeah, it's about every other week we drop an episode. It started off absolutely just dedicated to classic Universal horror
Hmm.
movies: Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Invisible Man,
Hmm.
Creature from Black Lagoon, everything like that. We've since expanded and we do like the Val Lunar KO movies, those
Hmm.
really noir ones. He did like I Walk with the Zombie and the Seventh Victim. We started doing an Age of Monsters thing where we're
Ooh.
doing King Kong, Tarantula, the Deadly Mantis.
Hmm.
It came from or the thing from another world. Because once you get into like the three digits of movies, like you start running out of stuff. We've even done some of the Poverty Row stuff with Lugosi, like the monogram films, like Bowery at Midnight. Um, I never, it started as kind of a lockdown thing
Hmm.
where a guy named Scott Kelly and I connected on a Universal fan group on Facebook. And he was like, would anyone want to do a podcast just on Universal Monsters? And I'd done a couple sort of video casts. It's on my YouTube page. If anyone wants to go to Jim Towns at YouTube. Um, I did one called October Country where I counted down every day in October to Halloween with a little, video about a different movie. But I wanted to do something basically just because it's not even about favorite movies. Abbott and
Hmm.
Costello Meet Frankenstein is probably the movie that made me into the filmmaker I am today. It was getting to watch that every couple Sundays. It
Hmm.
was on TV when I was little, and it was the thing that introduced me. Because again, we're talking a little bit before home video, so
Hmm.
you weren't able to go out and rent the Wolfman. The only
Yeah.
time I was seeing the Wolfman was when he's chasing Lou Costello around. So it was formative. A lot of people in the classic horror community call it the gateway drug because
Hmm.
it really was. It was the thing that got everyone hooked onto the older stuff. Um, and then I grew up loving all Frankenstein, Draco, Wolfman, all the classic stuff. More so even than my friends who were all into Freddy and Jason and stuff. I was like
Hmm.
the nerdy outlier guy. I was like, oh,
You're like the
kind
Universal
of like
monsters.
I'm kind of like Creature from Black Lagoon better. I like that the monsters were sympathetic. I
Hmm.
think, except for Dracula's kind of a dick. Um, the rest of them,
I want that as
things
the
have been done
poster
to
log
them.
line.
Dracula, he's a dick. Yeah. Um, uh, the Mummy, Wolfman, especially Frankenstein monster, all these sort of these creatures had been turned into monsters against their will,
Hmm.
and therefore there was a tragic quality to them. So I just always really enjoyed that part of it, and that's something I've really brought into the stuff I try to do. Um, but anyway, so yeah, we started as a just something to do during lockdown because I couldn't.
Hmm.
I was about to shoot something. I was on the phone with my director of photography about it, and I was walking around my neighborhood talking to him on the phone. Came home, and it was March 2020, and my wife was like,
Ooh.
"Yeah, we're locked down." That was it. And I didn't shoot that thing for another 9 months. Um, so it was just a thing,
Hmm.
but it seemed to take off. It seemed to get like it seemed to hit a fan base.
Yeah.
Um, the more crazy in depth and detailed and minute we got talking about these
Hmm.
movies, the longer the episodes went, the more popular they were, which is
Hmm.
interesting. So I think we started feeling like kind of a little hole in the fan base. There's a lot of classic monster podcasts out there. There's a lot of really good ones. I think we're one of the only ones that focuses super much on this era of movies from like 1920 to 1950 something. Like we started. I think the oldest one we've done Nosferatu. We did the original
Hmm.
family opera with Lon Chaney. And then we've gone all the way up to some of the sci-fi stuff.
So is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein still like the top for you, or in rewatching all of these, do you have one that's like, okay, sentiment aside, this is my favorite?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. It's hard to beat the nostalgic connection of
Hmm.
that movie.
Yeah.
So I saved it. That Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein was our 100th episode.
Oh,
Like
that's so
and
cool.
it was like we built it. I held off and held off and held off, um,
Hats off to
knowing
you.
that
100
I'll have
episodes is hard.
yeah, it's crazy. And each episode's at least an hour and a half long, so you're
Hmm.
talking a couple 100 hours worth of content now we've created. And at some point, Scott decided he wanted to focus on family stuff and other things, so
Hmm.
he departed the show in 2022, I think.
Hmm.
And then I brought in a new guy named Livio Marino. He became my regular co-host, but then I also started having like a rotating
Yeah.
group of other co-hosts to have different voices. I wanted some female voices on the show, so not
Hmm.
just two dudes talking. And the show started off being a little bit like a couple guys having some drinks and
Yeah.
chatting about. And Scott lives in Boston, so we were doing it remotely on Zoom.
Oh my goodness, the
Um,
time difference for you guys. Holy
yeah,
geez.
so you got to factor that out. And then when he left, I kind of took over the show and I brought it into the Shadow Camera Films world, which is my production company. We started recording it. We do it remotely. My co-host Livio's in Kansas City,
Hmm.
um, but we started doing it the way you record like a rock band, where like we
Yeah.
each record our own audio, and then
Hmm.
one of us sends it together and we mix it and stuff, and the sound quality of the show got better. I
Hmm.
think the scholarship of the show it got not more serious because we have a lot of fun, but it got a little more like scholarly at the risk of sounding like arrogant. But yeah, but I'm so proud of it, and I'm so proud to have like because everybody starts stuff,
Yeah.
and if and this too, obviously, Terrence, like it's easy to start a project,
Hmm.
and it's all new and shiny and fun,
Hmm.
and then at some point it becomes work. Like
Yes.
even the thing you do that you love becomes work at
Hmm.
some point, and I think that separates the people who like have a mission
Hmm.
from the people who are just sort of occupying their time or hobbying or something. Um,
Yeah.
when it's your thing, you'll keep pushing through, even though like it stops being fun sometimes, um,
Hmm.
because you believe what you're doing is important. And props to you for
Thank you.
keeping this one going too, because it's work. At the end of the day, it is work.
Hmm. It's kind of like I'm going to be curious. I'm sure the Beginner's Mindset podcast, not podcast show that you guys are going to be doing is
Yeah.
going to follow similar-ish vibes there, where
Yes.
learning how to do stuff is hard, and then
Right.
continuing to do it is difficult. Like you have that initial rush. I love working out. I'm a gym guy. My body does not show it, but I am a gym guy.
But
And when you first start, you get the beginner gains. You get the, oh, I went from zero to I know how to
yeah.
do this now and I can start, I feel better, losing weight, gaining muscle. But then you start to plateau because your body has that initial response. And then
Mm,
you need to start drilling down into more and more specific minutia, build volume, et cetera,
right.
which is the same with learning any skill. Eventually you hit that
Yes. Yeah.
plateau and you have to actually dig in harder to get better at it.
Yes, yes, yes. I think our culture is really hyper biased towards uh, the idea of just being a natural at something.
Yes.
The idea that you can just walk in and sing your song the
Yes.
first time and someone's going to discover you, and here we go. And we've created a pocket industry of this with
Mm-hmm.
American Idol and whatever that stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't do reality stuff. Um,
Yes and
but I
amen.
think but I think it goes true with films too, where like everyone thinks like they're going to make a movie
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to take off, and they're going to have this career and riches
Mm-hmm.
and fame and adulation. Um, and the reality is like I don't know anyone. I know a lot of filmmakers. I don't know anyone that's happened to.
Yeah.
I know some filmmakers that have done some stuff and then started achieving success, but
Mm-hmm.
the overnight thing, in my experience, is it's a 1% thing that happens maybe if it isn't just an outright myth. Um, it's work. It takes up and the beginner's mind is also part of what we want to bring is the idea is like when you start something, you're not necessarily good at it.
Yes.
So it's hard. It's harder at first, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're starting from zero, when you have no, I'd
Yeah.
never done a podcast like this. And when I started, we had technical issues. We had all sorts of
Mm-hmm.
mics and stuff like that. I struggled for better sounding audio. Um, and then, Killer X was actually the first. I shot sort of B camera and pickup
Mm-hmm.
footage myself for some of my previous films, but I'd never DP'd a film before. I'd never been the cinematographer on a movie. And when we were working on Killer X, the idea of filming it where we were going to film it for the money we had, it was becoming really evident that we weren't able to be able to afford a cinematographer that was of the quality.
Mm-hmm.
What we were going to be able to afford was going to be possibly risky. Whether this person could do it, and that's when I stepped in. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to shoot this myself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that was intimidating because I was working with people who were not Hollywood
Yeah.
film people. But my fear was I was going to show up and film it, and it was going to look terrible, and I was going to be the one to have messed up the film, like the pro, right?
Yeah.
So that was daunting. That's we talk about imposter syndrome, right? I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
still now I've shot 3 movies, since, and I still have it. And I still but I always say I went to YouTube University. I watched
Mm-hmm.
10,000 videos on cinematography, on Kelvin temperatures, on lighting, and on everything. And basically taught myself how to do it. And then and now I have the confidence that I can just step on a set and shoot some stuff. But my point is like I was already like a 15-year professional in the film industry, and I picked
Yes.
up like a new skill set that
Mm-hmm.
I honestly was not that great at yet, and I had to learn the difference between aperture and f-stops. I mean, all this shit that in the old days, my I talked to my DP, and he'd be like, "Well, we can't do this because the aperture is wide open. We don't have enough depth of field." And I'd be like, "Okay, sounds good," and I just have no idea what he's talking about. No idea. So so that's my point about it is like yeah, it's scary to start something new. Um, and then you do like you say you plateau. You reach that point where you're like, you know what? I actually kind of know what I'm doing, and that's the point where now in the
Mm-hmm.
artistic discipline at least, now you have to push yourself to the
Yes.
next thing. Okay, now can I shoot anamorphic? Now can I write outside of my comfort zone and go somewhere a little
Mm-hmm.
bit? And that's just how we grow as artists, creatives, and writers, as opposed to staying in our little comfy niche and just chucking out content, right?
Mm-hmm. I have a follow-up question for you on that, but just to quickly wrap this idea, one of the things that I love the Ian Fleming James Bond stories, shocker, I
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
but one of the things that I
Right.
always find impressive is that if you read the actual Fleming books, he never really settled into this is what's expected of me as a writer, therefore I write this. Most of his
Mm,
stories, they move from very noir-ish almost detective stories to men's adventure fiction, like the old pulp mags, where it's like monster
yeah,
shows up that has to be fought.
yeah.
And then you have The Spy Who Loves Me, which is very different than all the rest of them. But he kept changing like here and there things because he kept pushing what can I do within this realm?
Right, right, right.
What I want to ask you is, was there much of a shift for you as a filmmaker to writing when you started doing more literary projects in
Yeah.
addition to filmmaking? How much of a stretch was that for you?
It was a stretch, and it was kind of agonizing at first. Screenwriting in both its uh, like method and formatting is so drastically different from prose writing that it's almost like two different muscles.
Hmm.
Um, and so shifting out, there's a I talked about too much ink on the page, but there's also a thing where like if you're screenwriting for and potentially someone else to make the movie, like they're not they're going to resent if you're over describing how to make the
Hmm.
movie because that's not your job to make the movie. That's the director's job. If you're writing for, I write for myself, so it doesn't matter. But yeah. So every instinct you're taught or whatever is to not go into too much detail, and then you get into
Hmm.
novel writing, and it's like kind of all about detail. Like it's
Yeah.
really if you don't do that, you end up with a 32,000 word novella that you're just like, well, that's not a that happened. That's not a book. So it's about like retrain. I had to
Hmm.
retrain everything. Not least of all, the screenplays are written for the most part in present tense,
Yes.
and then you have to go to past tense. So that's a whole different like world mindset. Um, you don't use quotes in screenplay writing because you tab down and it says
Yeah.
like Bill all in caps, and then it has Bill's dialogue there. You're not using quotes. You're not using like it's just dumb stuff. Like what side of the quotes does the comma go on, and how do I separate? Yeah. So it's really like I'd written before. I'd written prose
Yeah.
stuff in my earlier years.
But this is valid
It
as
was
like the form is different. Even though
yeah,
you
yeah.
know
No,
how to write doesn't mean like I know how to write doesn't mean that I could write a screenplay because the
yeah,
form is
yeah.
different.
How do I do a scene? And you're trying to do the same thing, right? You have a scene between two people talking about someone who's just died or something, and you establish what the setting is, and you
Hmm.
begin the scene, and then someone says the first line that gets it cut off, and then the conversation takes a little trip,
Hmm.
and it has to at some point reach a satisfying conclusion before you get out of the scene and move on. Whether
Hmm.
you're filming that or writing it as a chapter, those two things work the same way. You get there in two totally different ways. Bloodsucker City was my first novella. It's about it, and it's available everywhere. It's a vampire. It's another vampire story. It's about a young woman during the Depression in the South who is falsely convicted of murdering her own son, and she's sent to this women's prison out in the middle of
Hmm.
nowhere. And she slowly learns that all the wardens there are vampires, and they've been feeding off of these women that nobody misses, right? Because they've all been
Yeah,
chucked
dude,
into this
society
thing,
has
right?
completely gotten rid of them at that point.
Right, right. So there's always that thing where they find reasons to chuck him down into solitary confinement, and then this woman finds herself in solitary confinement, and out of the shadows come the wardens, right?
Hmm.
I'd written that as a screenplay, and I got it close, but no whatever, and it didn't. I mean, so that was the first thing I decided. I'm going to take this screenplay and adapt it into whatever. If I had to do it over again, I would have just started rewriting from scratch because trying to
Hmm.
literally like copy and paste screenplay format stuff into it was honest, it was nightmarish, it was so bad. I have another script I'm doing that too off and on currently while working on other stuff, and it's such a pain. So I would recommend you just have the script there, look at it, and just
Hmm.
rewrite it
Hmm.
all together. It's functionally much easier.
I've actually heard of that as a editing technique. I read a great book. I say it's a great book. I don't remember the name of the actual book anymore. But basically, the
Great
premise
book.
was it was a great book.
Had a title.
Meant nothing to me. Don't remember the title. It's red. It's got yellow cover. That's all I need to know. But the premise of the book was basically how to write a story in three drafts. And his
Mm,
point was the first draft, instead of just copying and pasting from one to the other, have two screens open. We have computers. This works. And
yeah.
literally just read and type. Because what you do is that
Mm-hmm.
initial from one to literally rewriting it,
Oh, okay.
you are
Okay.
going to catch all of the little mistakes that you made that
Yeah,
first draft writing. And it's also your brain taking it in and redistributing it is going to go, oh, wait, it sounds better if I say it this way
that's
and
good.
make those
Yeah, no,
small
that makes sense. Yeah,
modifications.
yeah. I think there's a lot of things like that. They're almost like hacks
Mm-hmm.
to so I came up as an art as a visual artist. Actually,
Uh-huh.
that's what I went to college for. And the thing they'll have you do is if you do a drawing or a painting or something like that, um, you'll do things like you'll step back and you'll squint a little bit, and that helps you see like where your
Mm-hmm.
contrasts are and stuff. Or you'll turn it upside down and look at it and everything. All these tricks because you're our brains, I think, from the hunter era of our origins are trained to like fixate on the sometimes the overall thing and not see the
Yeah.
details or hyper focus on the details, one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you got to find those tricks to find how to do that. I think I realized I'd gotten to I think I realized I figured out my style
Mm-hmm.
and how I do things when I thought I deleted or I'd not saved some of my writing, and I thought I'd lost like a chapter basically, which
Mm-hmm.
is disappointing always, of
Yeah.
course. And I was like, I guess I'll just rewrite it. Okay, no. I looked around. I was like, I can't find this stuff. And then someone explained to me how I could go back to a previous version that was auto saved, and I could find.
Yeah.
And so now I've rewritten the chapter, and I get the original chapter, and I compare them, and I had basically rewritten it almost word for word. I was like, okay, so there's
Mm-hmm.
obviously just a way
Yeah.
I'm going to write this, and it's not up to variables. It's just like I figured out a style and everything. So that was the moment I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
for better or worse. That's my style.
Like when Hemingway lost his initial manuscripts.
Yeah, and had to the the six toed cat ate them. I don't know what. Yeah, it's crushing. Yeah, right. And so did he rewrite them all?
So basically, he said his. This is, of course, to be clear, filtered through his book A Movable Feast, which is like his memoir of Paris years.
Right.
So also Hemingway was Hemingway, which means nothing he says can actually be taken as gospel.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
story of what actually happened.
Yes.
And he was like, my wife left the suitcase filled with my typewriter and all my manuscripts that I'd worked on all the time I was in Paris at the train station, never
That's
recovered.
right.
And he's like, it's all bullshit anyway. Sat down and
Yeah.
started writing afresh.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that moment was like, okay, cut. I have to do this again. And that was like in Stephen Pressfield language, the moment he was like, I'm turning pro.
Yeah. No, and that's the measure. Like he got tested, right? Like how
Hmm.
much do you want to do? How badly do you need to do this? Like I think when it comes to trying to make a living as a creative, like I do, it's not a matter of like how badly do you want it. It's like how much do you need it,
Hmm.
and also like how bad are you at doing anything else? Which is I've had a bunch of jobs, and let me tell you, like there's nothing I do better than what I do now because I care so much. Like that's just the trick, I guess.
Hmm. So do you have any just general advice you'd give to people that are interested in becoming screenwriters? Because like you said, it is a skill, it is a discipline, it's something different than just sitting down and writing prose.
Yeah. Um, you know, my main advice really is usually don't listen to other people's advice. Like just
Valid.
figure out how you do your thing and do it because other people's advice, especially in the film industry, I will say, is so often laden with bias,
Hmm.
self-interest,
Hmm.
envy. It's I don't want to call it a rotten industry, but there's a very decent amount of toxicity, and it's especially present when you're working on the very lower
Hmm.
initial plateaus of filmmaking. It's sharky. It's really sharky. So you're going to get advice. You're going to be told you have to do it this way. You have to do it this way, or no one's going to read. You have to do it this way. No one's going to read stuff like that. I don't really. I know for a fact a bunch of different screenwriters who have all achieved something and each in a different way. So I guess if I had to say advice, there's no one way you're going to get
Hmm.
to where you're trying to get to. There's no such thing as this happens, this happens, this happens. It's not a formula. It's not like you're going to college and becoming like a
Yeah.
lawyer, right? Um, it's myriad and varied how everybody achieves some level of success. So the only real thing you can do is trust your own gut, be smart, be careful with your writing, obviously, um, and try to cultivate, any kind of links or leads or whatever.
Hmm.
Uh, People tell you don't work for free. I did plenty of free work in my
Hmm.
early days, and it it worked out for me in a lot of ways. Sometimes, there were things that a free gig did for me that I couldn't have paid for.
Yeah.
So yeah. At the same time, don't let yourself be taken advantage of.
Hmm.
Really, people
If your
say,
screenwriter and the casting director asks you to take off your clothes, don't do it.
yeah, not that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, but I will bet you this: if you're a screenwriter and you show up on set of the film that's being filmed of your movie, and someone hands you a boom pole and says, "Hold this," like, well, make a decision whether that's something you're going to let yourself do or not. Because that happened to me, and I'm on a
Oh,
boom pole, and and my director was like, he's like, you're not doing it very well. It's shaking. I was like, yes, because I'm the freaking screenwriter. Maybe there's a reason. Anyway, that guy. When I first moved out to. I'll tell the story really quick. When I
yeah.
first moved out to LA, I Craigslist was how everyone was looking for work at that point.
Hmm.
There's better sites now. I was looking at Craigslist and I answered an ad and went to a Denny's in Burbank and met with this crazy Israeli American guy who basically this guy had conned someone out of $10,000 to make a movie. Okay, not conned.
Wow.
He gotten $10,000 from someone to make
Oh,
a movie,
okay.
but he decided if he made three movies for $3,000, he could give the guy the one movie, and then he'd have these other two movies. But for some reason, that meant he had to make all those three movies in the same time frame as the one because he was sharing locations and actors between the films and stuff like that. So first of all, he's being totally dishonest and cagey and not upfront like that. But so what that meant was I had to write three feature length screenplays for him in like I had a week and a half or 2 weeks or something like that, which is um, uh, and it was a challenge and stuff, and I did it. But it was my first screenwriting job. He was absolutely awful to work for. He was one of the worst human beings I've ever been around in my life. He was abusive and whatever. But I met a guy named Ed Wedding on that set. He got pulled in to play a skinhead because he's an MMA fighter and he shaved his head. And I got pulled in to play a skinhead too because I shaved my head. So suddenly we're both going like, trying to pretend we're German, like, that's just this. But Ed and my relationship we've been friends ever since.
Hmm.
He and I are working on a project called The Stick Fighter. We're trying to do a movie. He's a heck of a nice guy. And I met him through that terrible experience. So my only other bit of advice is that not every experience is going to be a good one, but try to take something good out of that experience that you can
Hmm.
continue on and make it a part of your career as you build it.
Hmm. Honestly, underrated building a network, regardless of what you
Yeah,
decide to do, is a astronomical difference in whatever your job is.
yeah, and I think maybe for a lot of writers, it's the most challenging part because a lot
Hmm.
of writers aren't the most socially adept,
There's a reason they're
outgoing
writers.
people. Right. It's not to make a generalization, but yeah, there's a type that
Hmm.
we a lot of us fit into. I know I'm not like I've lately been making myself go out to see premieres and screenings and stuff, and it's something I don't haven't done a lot. I live a little bit south of LA. I live in San Pedro, so and I have a nice little house down here that I like, and I just like being here with my wife and my cats.
Yeah.
But lately, I've been like, I need to start dragging my ass out and going to these things and saying hi to people and showing my face and stuff because that is honestly part of
Hmm.
the job.
Yeah.
It might not be the part of the job I like best, which
Hmm.
is sitting on my couch and writing on a rainy day, right? But yeah, I like that. I have to do that stuff too. So yeah,
I'm curious. So, do you have because especially since you are a active filmmaker, what kind of do you have a writing routine? And if so, what does it look like?
um, I go through kind of phases in between writing and then shooting,
Hmm.
obviously, for each film. But lately, I'm in a weird thing right now where since the beginning of the year, the December and then into just up till now, I've been writing a lot of stuff. Jose from Killer X
Hmm.
is actively shooting the pilot for a show called City of Honor
Oh,
back
cool.
in New Jersey. I wasn't able to go there for it, but I wrote the pilot for that, and I'm writing the show Bible for that we're going to be pitching to networks. I am doing a film, another film back east with my friend
Hmm.
Amanda Schoonover. Um, that we've been trying to. She's in Killer X. She's the woman in the pool the whole time. That's
Hmm.
Amanda Marzana. She and I are working on stuff. So I've been writing a ton, and I'm
Hmm.
developing another show too that I'm trying to pitch around. So
I think you're not
this
busy
has been my
enough.
sort of yeah, I know. No, this has just been my a ridiculous 2 or 3 months. Um, but I'm coming to a close with that because we're going to be working on Beginner's Mind Journey. I'm going to be shooting my film with Amanda in May, and then Killer X starts shooting in the summer. So I think I'm going to go from a phase where I've been ensconced in my house writing all the time, in solitude, to a couple months where I'm going to be traveling to
Hmm.
back east to Pennsylvania, down to Trinidad, I think, to shoot some stuff.
Oh, wow.
Uh, 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 we're going west to some islands at some point. We might be going to Korea. So there's not going to be a lot of time for writing there. So it's almost just like, okay, well, this has never happened to me before, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend 3 months
Hmm.
just writing stuff,
Yes.
and then I think I'm going to spend 3 months just shooting things, which
Hmm.
is a different muscle. It's a very
Hmm.
different, it's much more physical. So speaking of that, like it's April 1st, I got to start in the gym again because filming on set, I shoot a lot myself and I shoot a lot of handheld. So
Hmm.
it's 9 or 12 pounds worth of camera
You're
in
just
my hands
continually
for most of the
holding.
day. Yeah, yeah. Well, you do you have a little brace that holds on
Yeah.
to, and then you do what's called 3 point stuff. So you have two handles, and then the back of the camera goes against the chest. So you're sort of pulling the camera in and doing that. But it's physically taxing. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and we might be shooting in the Caribbean in the summer, which is going to be a
Ooh,
thing for
nice.
the whitest guy you've ever seen. So wow, I'm going to probably scorch. But I'm excited about that. But that's that.
Hmm.
So to answer your question, I don't really have a system. I'm
Hmm.
fortunate enough to get to do this mostly for a
Hmm.
living. Uh, so so my time is kind of my own. But I think there are times where I have a deadline where I just have to write through the day. Like
Yeah.
I have to write as much as I can until my wife comes home from her work and we have dinner and I chill out for the night. Um, but I do like mornings for
Hmm.
writing. I really do. Uh, I like to change it up now that it's getting warm. We have a little cabana thing in the backyard and stuff like that. I
Oh,
like if I
nice.
can go out
Yeah.
there sometimes and do that just to get oxygen and air and
Hmm.
sun and everything.
Fresh air is so refreshing when you've been
Yeah,
sitting staring into a monitor.
yes, no, exactly. Yeah, and it's good for your eyes and your mental health and your vitamins and everything. Yeah, I walk. I'll write to a point where I kind of get in a thing. Like okay, now I'm gonna walk, and I'll just do like a mile up the hill and back. And I usually find by the time I get back, like I figured out whatever
Hmm.
corner I'd written myself into. I don't really write in public. Um, it's less about the distraction and more
Hmm.
about like one time I was at LAX. I was getting ready to get on a plane somewhere, and I was just working on something, and I get this weird feeling. I kind of like look around, and there's a dude like behind me going like he's literally just staring at my screen what I'm writing. I'm like, that's first of all intrusive. Second of all, this is privileged. Whatever. So I tend to like not that I'm worried
Hmm.
about someone stealing my thing or something. That's just dumb. But that's another piece of advice. It's like you know what if you're for writers, if you come up
Hmm.
with a great idea, right, what you think is a super cool idea, you have to assume that there's a half dozen other people in LA
Hmm.
writing something kind of similar because it's part of the zeitgeist, right? I mean, every
Hmm.
once in a while you get something truly original. So you'll have been working on something or an idea and a movie. You'll see a trailer for a movie and you're like, that's literally 80% the thing I was writing. And now you're
Hmm.
like, maybe I can't do this now because of you know.
Oh,
I had something just like that. Something came up. I was like,
yeah.
I can't do this movie now. Something came out. So
I just finished, I'm finishing writing an aviation story. And I'm sitting there,
yeah,
the opening of the story, I have it's like World War One, his plane is crashing. I'm like, okay, great. It's kind of cliche, but my version of doing the cliche. I open up a
yeah,
dude's book and literally the first 2 pages is the exact same thing I wrote, and I'm like, shoot,
yep.
time
Got to
to
find
cut,
something.
rewrite.
Yeah, got to find another avenue. Yeah, it just happens. And like I said, I think it's just we're all sort of taking in the things we
Hmm.
grew up liking or things we like now, and our brains is reshuffling them. and it's kicking them back out through our own language,
Hmm.
right? Um,
How many versions of Stranger Things existed before Stranger Things existed that no one actually got to production?
yeah, exactly. And how many people pitched something like Stranger Things, and someone was like, "That's dumb," right?
Yeah.
And then,
I
right?
think that that's one of the things I'm realizing is most of the time, it's not even that someone hasn't heard the idea already. It takes a lot to get something made. I just read a great
Yeah,
book that I really enjoy. It's time travel, sci-fi, archaeology stuff. And the author made a comment in the like acknowledgments, thanks to such and such who helped me get this to the finish line. I'm sure other
yeah,
people have had that idea, but it takes so much to get it made.
yes. And as my second final bit of advice will be, um, finish things. Finish
Yes,
the thing. Sorry, my iPad zooms in and out. It's
that's
really
okay.
distracting.
Hey,
Um,
it's
uh,
dynamic
yeah, right.
filmmaking
Yeah,
here.
I thought you did like a tracking shot. I just noticed that. No, finish stuff because I've known a bunch of really talented people that I was reading their stuff and I really
Mhm.
liked it. And the thing is, if you never finish it, you're never gonna. No one's ever gonna see it. I know finish something is scary because when it's finished, now it's going to go out in the world, and
Mhm.
some people are going to not like it, and some people are going to be okay with it, and some people just won't care, and that hurts. And I've gotten shredded in reviews of my films. I've got shredded in
Mhm.
reviews of things I've written. It's never fun, uh, but if you don't finish it, no one gets a chance to look at it. And those people that do enjoy the thing you're doing are going to be cheated out of it. So it's tough, but you do have to finish what you start.
Jim, this has been a fantastic conversation.
All right. Yes.
Where can people go to learn more about you and your work? What have you got going on right now that you want to share?
Oh, I'm on Facebook and Instagram as Jim Towns. Just check me out. You'll see my face on there. And I do a pretty regular update of things that are going on with me and projects I'm working on. You can go to jimtowns.com, and there's a few videos on there, but mostly it's a collection of my writing, things I've written for anthologies that now, they came out a couple years ago. Now I can repost it, or there's links to wherever they were published. Tons of my short story stuff are on there. You could read for a few hours of stuff. Um, so that's there. End Times
Hmm.
and Killer X are both available on. Uh, well, it's gotten complicated. Some of them are on Amazon, Prime TV. Some of
Hmm.
them are on Tubi. The Beast Inside just came out
Hmm.
recently.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a exorcist movie about a woman who's possessed and nobody believes her, and so she has to check into a cheap motel and try and exorcise herself. Uh, Starring Sadie Katz and Vernon Wells from The Road Warrior and Commando. We made that during pandemic. It's available for rent or purchase on
Hmm.
Apple TV and Prime as well, so you can check that out too. My books are all on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Check those out. Bloodsucker City, Braddock's Falls. Also, I have poetry and short sort of writing and photography book called Whiskey Stories that's out there
Hmm.
as well.
Awesome. We'll link all of that in the show notes. Jim,
That'd be great.
thank
Much
you again for
appreciated.
coming on the show.
Terrence, thanks so much. I really appreciate it, man. It was fun.
Yeah.